Hello, Courage, Confidence, and Connections podcast listeners. Welcome back to another episode of our podcast. Today, my guest is Michael Hudon, and he's got a fantastic story. He's a filmmaker, uh, fairly new in the filmmaking market, and I'm going to have him talk about that and how courage and confidence have impacted his life and connections as well. So, welcome, Michael.
Yes, thank you, Janice. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I'm delighted you could join me and share your story. I've known you for, I guess, a couple years now, it seems like. It's been a while.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yes, ma'am.
so I've kind of kept an eye on your journey, and this is so wonderful seeing you step into this world of filmmaking, and I know it's a different world. But what I'd like you to do is share a little bit of your story, history-wise, of you know, now I know you work professionally. We won't mention the name. We don't want to give them any play, but
Yeah.
I know you. So you've done this in your spare time. So tell me a little bit about your story and let our listeners get to know you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it probably, I guess, goes back as far as like when I was a kid. I think I like the my favorite thing in the world would be to watch movies and just kind of write my own stories and stuff from like a really young age. But I think I remember the first job that, or like the first thing I remember doing was always like that I wanted to do was I would kind of come up with movie posters, even though I was really bad with like illustrations and drawing. Like that was not for me. Like I realized pretty quickly there was a major difference in why there's like authors and illustrators, and I was not could not draw to save my life. But I loved the storytelling aspect and creating my own stories um and I kind of had like a big imagination and stuff as a kid. So a lot of free time to myself to where I could, get lost in my own world and create those. But I think that's like the earliest memories that I have, I think were just telling stories, reading books, a lot of books, and watching movies any chance I could get. That's what I would do. And I do remember my mom getting me one of those like those small TVs with the VCR like attached to it when I was a kid, and that was like my one of my favorite things in the world. But yeah, so that's if that's what you meant, like that early on. But when it comes to like the filmmaking, I mean, I grew up in a small town in Montana, and I think like in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and I really wasn't focused on any of that. Just kind of focused more on like partying and hanging out and doing everything but school and applying myself. And it wasn't until like 10 years or so post graduation that I started to think about. Um, I guess it just never seemed like feasible or like an option for me, like in my mind. Like I just kind of never thought that that would be like a possibility. But like you mentioned, I was working a job where I was going to work every single day, and I was raising my daughter, and I realized like I was super unhappy and was like, what's going on here? Like I'm just kind of doing the same thing every day, and I'm not doing what I want to do. And I hate that it took me that long to kind of realize that. And but I'm glad that I had something like the Los Angeles Film School and their online program, because it was very convenient for me to be able to like still work full time and raise my daughter full time, and then also put myself through school. So it actually like allowed me to kind of pursue that dream and chase that. And they apply you with all the equipment that you need. And like I said at the beginning, they teach you all the every aspect of the filmmaking process, and so you have to learn how to use that equipment, and it all culminates into you producing your own films in order to graduate. So
Wow, that's fantastic. I love the story. I mean, I know your mom, so I love
yeah,
the story about her getting you the TV with the VCR and you being intrigued by movies. You know me, I'm a movie buff. I love, love, love movies. And
yeah,
yeah, and so being a storyteller, also, you and I have a lot in common. We're both storytellers. Yours is on film and mine's in writing. Of course,
yeah,
you write yours before you film it, and that's even a bigger step than what
yeah.
I do. So, on that note, you've got two prior films. Now I know one was for family, but that documentary just touched my heart. Can you just share a little bit about that? Because it's an amazing film job and story behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had to we had to do like a they called it a like a small capstone, or like your pre capstone is what it was. So it was supposed to be this like, you know, small, just like it could have like, I think what they wanted was like a scene, and I ended up writing like a 7 page, and it could be a documentary or like a narrative short, but like I ended up making, it was 7 pages, but it ended up being like 15 minutes worth of a film for like my first film. So I think it was a little bit more ambitious, and I had a few more locations and things that it was like my first time and really trying to like put something together and not really knowing everything that like the filmmaking process kind of entails, or like kind of like putting the, you know, putting it into action. And
Yeah.
so I learned a lot, but I had this like, you know, blind ignorance almost, that was just, I was kind of willing to jump into the fire and see what happened. But and so like I said, we had an option of doing like a documentary or a narrative short. And for me, like I never thought about doing documentaries before. Like it was not something that like was particularly interesting to me. Like I always loved like I went into the school with kind of the goal of wanting to write my own films, and you know, potentially like direct or produce. And but then we had the next month, we had to end up like doing our own documentary. So we had to produce a documentary, and I had no idea what I was going to do it on. And and we had gone through a lot that year with my mom and my stepdad. My stepdad had a brain aneurysm that he ended up falling when we had a bad winter, I think, at the beginning and so it was like the beginning of the year. But because he fell, went to the emergency room, that's when they found the brain aneurysm, and they had to do a surgery. But I wanted to tell kind of their story, because their story I thought was fascinating to me. And I guess I really love, you know, like you mentioned, like storytelling, but like if it's someone else's story, like I was able to kind of grasp onto that. And I guess that was enough to kind of get me motivated, because they met a long time ago, like back in the 80s. And they had kind of like a summer love before he ended up, you know, going into the army. And then they were, you know, separated by a couple of decades, and both had their own marriages and their own kids. And then they kind of, you know, reconnected again. And so yeah, I think it was only like 9 or 10 minutes, but it was fun because I was able to sit down with both of them and do like an interview and have them tell their story. And then I was able to have a lot of fun. I found my love for the documentary aspect and doing things like that was like in the editing process,
Right.
because I was able to, you know, see that, you know, she was telling this, and I was just able to cut it in a certain way where I think it made it a lot of fun for me. I do like interviewing and just kind of talking. I've done something for my sister for her wedding. She'd asked me to do something about how her and her husband met. And I enjoy doing that, but I really love the editing process, because it seemed to me that the documentary, for me, it felt like I kind of got really motivated in the editing process, kind of like in post production. But in like narrative film, it's kind of the opposite. Like you're obviously like you start, especially if you write your own film, like you're the one sitting there with a blank, you know, final draft or whatever software you use. Like you're sitting there with a blank white page, and you have to write it and then go through the entire pre-production process. So it almost seems like flipped for me, where like it's like I got really inspired and had a lot of fun in the editing process, which I love editing.
It's great.
So you know, yeah, either or, I love it.
Well, I love that story. And now on the next film, this was actually a short movie that you made. And so you wind up being a screenwriter and the film producer, editor. You do everything but acting in most of them. I think you may have acted a little bit in the first actual film, not the documentary. Did you do?
Uh, So the documentary I'd done second, but the if we're talking about the very first film that I did,
Yes, yes, that's I didn't
yeah,
realize they were in that order.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I was supposed to like I did everything behind the camera. Like I set up all the lights and I did the audio and I did everything. I was the only crew person. And I was originally supposed to like I wrote it with myself in mind to be in front of the camera, which thank God that did not happen. It was like the first time that I kind of got motivated to like get in the gym because I just had never done that. So I started going to a CrossFit for like a few months, like leading up to it,
Mhm.
just thinking I was going to be in front of the camera. But I was able to meet. Um, I was the screenwriting club leader for the Los Angeles Film School, and so I was able to meet a gentleman that he lived like 5.5 hours above me in Washington, and he was a couple years behind me in the school, but he was interested in writing, and so him and I were meeting quite a bit, just kind of like trying to help him through like the whole screenwriting process. And it was through like conversations with him that I was like, have you ever thought about acting, before? Like, has that ever like entered your mind? And he was like, nope, I just want to write. Like, I have no interest in that. But so I was able to kind of, I guess, pique an interest or like kind of plant that seed in his mind. And he was very interested and he was willing to do it. And he drove all the way down here just for a weekend. And actually 2 weekends because we had to do like reshoots and stuff for the second weekend. But yeah, he put everything into it, and uh, I was very pleased with what he was able to do.
Yeah, that's great. And I didn't realize they were in the reverse order. So, but
Yeah,
yeah, but you're coming up in the trade. You've learned so many parts being a writer and kind of struggling to get my second book. I've got my journal, of course, by the same name, but struggling to get started on my basically a biography about my life or
mm.
autobiography. And so I really respect the fact I don't know how different it is to do screenwriting, but I know it's very different. Um, but let's talk about that and then go into let's talk about that new film that's the one I haven't seen yet. Uh, I guess I'll be privy to it. But I really want to know about that because I want to promote your film and your filmmaking, and I just I have a passion for this. So I want you just go for it, and I'll raise my hand if I have a question.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, just to kind of go off of what you were saying, I mean, I've never written an autobiography, and but it's so tricky. And like the difference with like the screenwriting thing is that you have to like format it in a certain way. But like, luckily, we have in this day and age in the year 2025, there's kind of like no excuse. Like you have all this software that eliminates all of that for you. So like I use Final Draft and it really makes it to where you just only kind of go in there to write. But there's definitely a lot of differences because I've also like I started before I was doing the film and like learned like the craft of screenwriting. I was writing books and stuff like that, like more fiction. But yeah, definitely like writing about yourself is tricky. I would imagine.
Yes, I did get my first chapter out and I was approaching it from a third party telling my story. I shared it with my co-writers and my writers group and a friend that's an author, and as it turned out, I was like, no, I've got to write it as me. And and so it's a learning curve for all of us in that writing business. But now let's talk about this new film and the title, a little bit about the story. I just want our audience to be really intrigued by it and drawn to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the my new film is called After Sunset. I've like the both my first narrative short and my second they're both dramas. I don't know why that's it's I mean I do love watching dramas, like those are probably like my favorite movies, so maybe that's why I ended up writing about it. But like writing for me has always been like a really tricky thing, I guess. Like I think and I guess it goes into like what we were previously talking about. Like I found what I find the most difficult about writing is that like we're our own, worst critics. And so like the first thing that we write down, like, or at least for me, I'll say, like, I'll look at what I write and I'll walk away and then come back and be like, why did I write that? That is so bad. Like it's awful. I just and I'll delete it or something. But with this new film, After Sunset, I was able to and there was a book that I read that actually like really helped me. That shined a big light and kind of opened my eyes to um, that's not what you should do. Like you should write as much as you possibly can and kind of treat it like it's your you know like your diary or something like that, and that like you don't lie in your diary. So you just write down, you're the only person that's going to see it, but you need something on the page before you can begin to like refine and rephrase. And I have some like musical background as well, so like I've written plenty of songs, and that's what I was doing before I was chasing my dreams as like a filmmaker. And I remember the process of like writing lyrics for me was always extremely difficult, because there would be times where I would like force myself to sit down and I could have maybe a line written in like 6 hours. And then there would be other times where I would just absolutely maybe write a full verse. And it would always be like sporadic, and I'd maybe like start in the second verse and then somehow, bounce around and get this like cohesive song that but I think it was like I think it's less of a conscious kind of goal and more of tapping into something subconsciously for me when I write. And so with this one, it ties into that. Like I think I've always kind of tried subconsciously. There's like problems, in my life, like things that are going on in my life, situations that I'm going through, and I think those tend to like pop up. So I was going through something at the time of writing this film, and it just so happened to kind of show up. Like it wasn't like a conscious effort to sit down and write about something. But this film is about a relationship and coming to an end, and it's a lot about um, endings and new beginnings. And but the main thing, without giving too much away, because it's only like a 5 or 6 minute film at the end of the day. It's a lot. I really wanted to focus on like responsibility, like accountability, and compassion, because I feel just from like what I've seen in life, like sometimes you'll see relationships that look to be uh, flourishing and just absolute, like almost like a romantic tale. Like you can never kind of see it end, and then it just kind of like it gets really toxic, and then it stays toxic as it goes forward, like throughout the end, and then it just kind of stays that way or it gets worse. And so I really wanted to do something where it was really like individual based and introspective, and reflection or reflective, through introspection, and try to find a perspective, like a different perspective um, of it all. And so it's a lot about growth. Yeah.
Well, you're speaking my language. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've read anything that I've written, but literally, I've had several people ask me, well, how do you get started on your blogs, the storytelling and the other type too? Pretty much there's a story behind everything I write. But I had somebody ask, well, how do you come up with this? And I sit down, literally, I sit down, keys on the keyboard. When I feel inspired, I just put the keys on the keyboard. Like yourself, it comes from the subconscious. It comes from a place of either where I've been or what I'm going through. It comes
Our
from,
own experiences.
yeah, it comes from a deep, deep place. So I find that really powerful. Um, I like the title because there is a new beginning for all of us. We all go through endings, and we all don't, very few people really enjoy the endings, but we do like those new beginnings, don't we?
And the new beginnings can be tough at first. Like for me, I've always been gosh, what's the word for it? Like slow to embrace change. Like I'm kind of like set in, in my ways. Like I have a kind of a set routine of things that I do, and then when I get if something changes, I'm kind of like a fish out of water when it comes to that. But yeah, and the title, I actually heard a filmmaker mention that titles are like the easiest thing in the world, or they're impossible to come up with. And for me, with this one, like it was one that just I could see it so early on in the process, and like I kind of knew what I wanted to do because I wanted to, kind of, it's a drama, but it's I wanted to kind of not like attack like the romance genre, but I also like, I wanted to make it really poetic and kind of use the sunset as a metaphor for, the end of a relationship. Um, and like I mentioned, that like new beginning. And so there's a whole kind of a monologue that I had wrote throughout the beginning, the first part of the film. The whole first act is, which, like I said, is only like a minute and a half. But as you're seeing this vignette of, these different moments throughout a relationship, there
Mm.
is a voiceover, like a monologue, and I wanted to write something that was very kind of poetic, that eventually like kind of went into that sunset metaphor. Um, and yeah, it just that title came to me so easy and so quickly, and I was pretty shocked to find that it's not really like a title that has ever been used before in like maybe like a prominent film like on IMDb. When I was creating the IMDb page, there had already been people that had filed to have that, but they're more like short films and uh yeah, but nothing, nothing in like big Hollywood or even in the independent space. There's like names that are similar, um but yeah, not quite After Sunset. And that, to me, like I said, that was one of the earliest things to get that out of the way, because I hate titling anything, like especially if I'm really struggling with it and I can't come
Mm.
up with it. So I'm glad that that one came organically and like naturally. And like I said, I think I kind of hit like a different level um when it came to like my own writing process. Like I like I said, I started writing music and I've been writing stories for the longest time. But I think with this one, I really learned a lot about myself as a writer. And I think it's a lot like life, where like you never really quite understand, or like you're still learning things. And so like I'm 30 years old, this year, and uh I still feel like that was one of the most mysterious things, because it seems like we had mentioned, it's very like a subconscious thing. And it's tough because you want to control it so bad. Like you want to be able to sit there and be like, I'm sitting down, I'm writing this, and it doesn't work that way. Like it almost seems like there's like, so for me, writing has always been like kind of like a spiritual thing, and almost like
Yeah.
a vessel, if that like makes any sense. Like I'm just kind of something's, and I feel like I tapped into that quite a bit, and I didn't force myself to sit down and write. Like I went ahead and made dinner, and I went ahead and I took a walk, or I was working, and then I would just be sitting there and I'd think of something and I'd write it down, and I wouldn't erase it. And I would just, piled up everything in my notes until I eventually started to refine and rephrase and get it to where I wanted to, before I took it into like final draft to write it.
Yeah. That's And that is great, because I call it a download. I just, it's a down,
Yeah.
and you just have an open heart to, okay, what am I doing here? I have one of my blogs, and this has been one of the most popular and intense that I've ever written, called One Chain. I think that's what I called it, or The Key. I've written both, but I wrote this one, and there's this, I was having lunch with another author friend, and I was sharing this with him, the idea about writing this particular blog. And he goes, I'm going to create that image for the blog. So he created this image of an old man. I think it's called The Key. I think that's the one that's called The Key. And this old man who's sitting and looking outside through prison bars. And he looks like he's been there 150 years. And he's holding a key in his hand. He could unlock and leave at any time. It's about mindset. But if we sit and hold, we have our own keys to unlock our own future. And that's what I hear in your story. It's a passion to continue to set those beautiful ideas free and share them with the world, because you are full of ideas and you haven't even begun to see where it's going to go, is what I'm feeling.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, and I think to kind of play off like the title of your podcast and like the courage and the confidence and the connections, like for me, I feel like those you kind of get through doing the thing, right? Like you have to, like I remember being so terrified and not knowing how to use like when I got my second shipment from the Los Angeles Film School of all my equipment, it was like 20 boxes and they were of various sizes. Yeah, like massive, some massive boxes, some little boxes, and I had to sit down, take inventory. But I remember like I didn't know how to use a tripod and I didn't know how to use the camera. And so what I did was just I would set it up and like build it and tear it down, set it up, build it, like tear it down. And I just did that over and over and over again because I knew that there would be situations where, say that I do something like run and gun where like I'm needed really quickly, I would be able to, almost without thinking about, building out the camera or, do like I could just do things fast because you have to do things very fast because especially when you're working with other people on a film, people are waiting on you. Like there's actors, sitting there that are waiting for you to figure out the lights and figure out, everything. So you kind of have to be able to do it quickly. And I figured that was the best way for me to learn how to do it is to do it. And so there's a lot of fear. Like I don't think I'm a very courageous person. Like there's a lot of different areas in my life where I could be a lot more courageous. But I think you get the courage and the confidence and the connections, at least for me as a filmmaker, by doing the thing. And like you almost want to go into it with kind of a blind ignorance, like I mentioned in my first film, where I didn't know really what I was kind of getting myself into. Like I knew how to use, like I went through the whole process of learning how to use the equipment. And then it was just like, okay, now I actually have to like make this happen. And it was very like daunting and very, very scary. And I had no idea what to expect with it. But I just kind of jumped in. Like you can't, and like you said, with like it is a mindset type thing. And I think we can be our own worst enemies. Like, if we're consciously, like we can judge ourselves and we could think that, uh, so we just have that part of our brain that will, there's a negative, at least for me, there's like a negative part of my brain that is just in constant like dialogue, back and forth with myself. And it seems like a big struggle, but if you're able to silence that part of your brain, and like you mentioned, the most important word I think is passion. Like if you find what you're passionate about,
Mhm.
um, then it's almost like it's almost inevitable that you're going to like figure out the things because there's nothing that you wouldn't do to not make it happen. So as much as like there's some days where I'm like hitting my head on my keyboard trying to like figure it out, although like I said, I'm a little bit more compassionate with myself now and I feel like I know a little bit more like my writing style. um, but yeah, there's all the handbooks in the world for stuff like that, but you don't, some what works for some person might be completely different for like people that I see sitting in like Starbucks writing on their laptop, and you can tell they're like writing a story or they're like doing something. Like they have to like be in a room full of like I could not do that. Like I need absolute silence where I can just hear that, negative voice in my head.
Yeah, I have to. Matter of fact, when my funny story, when my internet was down for about 10 days, believe it or not, that'll drive you crazy.
Yeah, I bet.
Someone said, just go write, just go to the bookstore, go to the coffee shop and write. I'm like, don't know, I can't, because the distractions are too many, the voices are too many,
Hmm.
noise. I'm like you, it's I can have music on at home or something like that, but as far as, and it's got to be instrumental, it can't be people singing because I tend to go in that direction, and when I'm writing, I want it to be download and inspired, not contrived by distractions. So I'm on that page, and people can do it. I want to mention a movie to you. I was going to wait till we weren't recording, but because it's got to do with screenwriting, it's a movie called Please Stand By, and you might find it extremely interesting. It's a young lady, well, she might be about your age in the movie, I think, or in her 20s. She has autism and she's living in a group home, but she's writing this script for a new Star Trek episode. And it's a real contest. It is a contest she's in. Well, I won't tell the end of the story, but she was a really, really super good writer, even with her mental issues. I found it fascinating that, speaking of downloads, their brains work very different than ours do. And it was just interesting to me, not a true story that I know of, however, a very well told story that this young lady and the things she went through, again, I won't give it away. I think it's well worth the watch with you being a screenwriter. You might relate to some of the stuff she went through, her determination to be in that contest. It
Yeah,
was
no, I would love to watch. I can't believe I haven't heard of that. Is it a newer movie or is it a
It
bit
may have come
older?
out in the last few years, but I'm sure it did
Okay, I'll check it
well.
out.
Yeah, I think it's on, the big Prime because that's my primary go-to. But it's really, I just found it really inspiring and fascinating. So maybe our listeners can take a look at that too. Now,
Yeah.
what are some of your future plans? Are you in the writing phase? Are you planning on filming anytime soon?
Gosh, yeah, no, I'm not in the writing phase. At least any of like my own like, my own personal work. As of right now, the connection part, because my first film, and that was because I lacked courage, really, that I did my first film by myself, because I was so like nervous and would like I was a beginner, first time making a movie, did not want other people like working on it with me to see how like amateur and beginner I am. But we have to like start somewhere. So it was just me and my actor. But through that process, no matter what you do, like I'm very proud of what we're able to do with that film, but there's still going to be things that lack. Like it's never going to be perfect. Like you cannot spread yourself that thin when there's so much that goes into making a movie. And so my biggest takeaway from that was that there's a reason that there's like 300, 400 names on like a big Hollywood movie of people that worked on this project. So like the big takeaway for me, and it should have, like I said, it should have been obvious, was that I need to find other people. Like I know what my strengths are, like what I'm trying to do. And so now let me try to find a good team of people to build, or to put my trust in them, and share my vision, build that trust, and then let them do their thing. And so I was able to do that. We didn't have the biggest team in the world because it was all self-funded, but I was able to put together a pretty small, but just amazing team of people for After Sunset. And I'm working again with those very same people. We've been in pre-production, for the past couple months. We were supposed to actually start production in December, for our next project that we're all doing together. But I ended up having to pull out, or make some changes to the scheduling, and now it's looking a little bit tricky to. We don't know exactly when we're going to get out of the pre-production stage and start filming, but it should be very soon. But the important thing is that, like I said, building that network, and I've found an amazing team of people, that I just could not, they were such a blessing. I would not have been able, the film, my After Sunset film, would not be what it is if it wasn't for the people that I found. And so I'm just extremely grateful. and it's amazing to be working with them again and to get another opportunity to to work on another project with them, and this time from the early stages of like concept. It's been four of us that have kind of been meeting once a week talking about this, what story we're going to do.
That's fantastic. It's good to know that you're moving forward with this because the passion is so strong. Now,
Yeah.
where can people find After Sunset? Is it available to buy, rent, watch somewhere?
So it's not yet, and the reason for that is because my first film, I just threw it up on YouTube and let it fade into the algorithm to disappear. And with this film, I wanted to actually take it to film festivals. And there's a lot of film festivals that they won't accept your film if it's released, anywhere online. So and the sad thing is that it probably won't be available to view until like next year, which is crazy because we filmed this thing almost a year ago in April of 2024. But I've already submitted to a bunch of film festivals in Oregon, and then I'm also going to be submitting to a bunch of film festivals throughout the Pacific Northwest. So if you're in the Pacific Northwest, or if you're in Oregon and you might happen to see that there's a film festival coming up, if it gets accepted into the film festivals, there's more than likely a good chance that it will be there. But most of them aren't until like summer and fall. So
Well, our winter's here, so
yeah,
unpredictable. And that is fantastic. So at the end of our podcast here, we're going to have Michael's information and how you can be in touch with him and be supportive if you have a passion for filmmaking or for helping artists in this way. I'm sure the support would be welcome if you'd like to be on a team and you have some talent. I'm sure he'd love to talk to you. But he's an up and comer, so you want to keep an eye on Michael Hudon. You really, really do. I've seen his work, and yes, very powerful. It's very, very powerful. So
thank you.
we might not see him on the big names like, Amazon yet, but who knows? Anything can happen. Anything can happen. Uh,
Yeah, we're working towards it.
ab-
It's a steady grind.
well, yeah, it doesn't happen overnight. So,
Mm.
and that's true for any and creatives like we are. We want, gosh, I really want to see this do well, but it's slow and steady as it
Well,
goes.
and because it's never really about the like setting an end goal. For me, it's just kind of like you gotta revel and enjoy what you're doing for the time being. So I know I've always done things creatively for myself, and then if it just so happens to resonate with other people, then that's fantastic. But I would do this even if no one was able to watch them because there's just a lot of joy. And like I said, it's just what I'm passionate about and it's what I've always been interested and drawn to. And yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there at some point. But for now,
Well, that's great. That's great. And we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank you so much, Michael, for taking time out of your weekend as we're recording this to do this with me and be a guest. So, listeners, keep an eye out for the next episode. This is Janice Debo signing off for Courage, Confidence, and Connections podcast. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so
thank
much.
you. Yeah, thank you, Janice, and thank you, everybody.